What's up, security gang? Welcome to another episode of the CISO Talk podcast. I've got a special one for y'all today. One of my favorite authors in our industry, the author of this awesome book, the number one book in the country as of today. This is January 13th when we're recording. Project Zero Trust, George Finney. He's also the CISO over at SMU. Will be joining us to talk about what I feel like is one of those books that is easy to read and fun to read. And we're going to be talking all about the book on today's episode. So don't go anywhere. You can buy the book in the show notes, by the way, below. There's an Amazon link to go get it. You don't want to miss it. You definitely want to get this book. The way it's written, the messages behind it, it's easy to understand. It's very easy to get into it. And it's a character book. Yep, it's a character book. So without further ado, let's bring George in. So here we go, folks. CISO Talk time. Let's get it going.
From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're listening to the CISO Talk podcast. No sales, no bullshit, just straight talk. Straight talk. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
George, welcome to the podcast, buddy.
James, thanks so much for having me. It's so cool. I love talking to you, and this is going to be a fun show.
Oh, I'm so psyched for the show. I was reading your book last night, kind of wrapping it up, getting ready for the interview, and my wife kept looking at me on the couch going like, am I going to get any attention? And I was like, I can't put this book down. Like, I can't put the book down. It's like, it wasn't just another cyber book where you're kind of sitting with your highlighter and with your notes and you're taking notes. It's a character book. You kind of really do get attached to the characters in the book. You kind of, if you've been a practitioner and you've been part of any sort of cyber event and kind of the rebuilding process, you really do put yourself in the rooms of some of these conversations you have in the book. It was really well done.
Well, thank you for that. Now I'm just picturing you like, sitting up in bed, like reading, late at night with the light on and, bothering your wife. So sorry, my apologies to your wife, but I appreciate you saying that.
My wife and my 1-year-old both hate me significantly for that. So, but George, you've been on the show before, but for some of our new listeners or some of the older listeners that have been around, they may or may not know you. Would you mind just giving them a little brief background about how you kind of got started in security and what you're doing today?
So I feel like I've been in security since I was a kid. I was a latchkey kid, right? So I'd walk home by myself with my keys, and of course, as a kid, I would always forget my keys because what 9-year-old can be that responsible? So I had to learn to like break into my own house, just to survive. The 80s were a crazy time, kids. So I got my start out of college. I started like a lot of other folks in networking and figuring that out. I moved over to the system side, learned Linux and was a sysadmin, email, DNS, did all that. And the theme of it, of all of that was security, right? Running firewalls, hardening systems, and I love open source. I'm a huge proponent of open source software, and I got this wild hair. Decided to go to law school. So I'm an attorney. I apologize. I hope don't hold it against me. But it made so much sense. With all of that background to go into security, right? That's really the theme that's carried through my whole life. And gosh, just as a career, what other career do you get this much out of? Protecting people, engaging, always kind of learning new things because we're always on the bleeding edge. So just everything about that, I just love and to be able to give back through writing books, and that's kind of my calling. But to know that folks like you, leaders in our industry, are like, hang on, holy cow, like this is a really impactful thing for us. That just means the world to me.
Well, I won't waste your time on this, but I will tell you this: the book's really well written, and I want to get into it. So this book, unlike a lot of, and I've got a lot of cyber books behind me, and there's even more that I got to bring down to this shelf here. Hopefully this weekend. I've read a lot of cyber books. None like yours. So the book's character driven. I feel like, and you kind of picked Dylan. Dylan's kind of the star of the book, right? He's not the CISO. He's kind of the new, kind of one of the guys there. What was the motivation for you to write a book that was more character driven around zero trust?
So the way the book came about, like I'd written my last book. It took like 3 years to write. It was just such a passion project, and I thought I was out, but they pulled me back in. So this never happens, by the way. But the publisher called me out of the blue, and they're like, we want you to write a book on zero trust, and I'm like, who me? So I actually, I'm good friends with John Kindervag, who created Zero Trust, and I wasn't going to just write the book. I actually called him and was like, hey, you've been talking about writing this book for years. Why don't, I can just connect you guys. And it turns out he's just too busy with his new startup. They do managed services with a zero trust emphasis. Definitely check them out onto it. He was like, man, you do it. I'll give you all my notes. I'll we met multiple times to kind of talk through the scenario. But like that first night, so the way that you write a book, right? Even when the publisher comes to you and says, please write this book for us, you have to write kind of like a proposal, like a business plan for your book, to talk about the audience, to talk about the approach, what other books are out there on the same subject, that, what your competitors are, if you will. So I'm like, dang, how am I gonna? But like, it was so magical. As soon as I talked to John, or even maybe a little before, I just knew we had to do it as kind of this novel-based approach with characters. I've always wanted to be a writer, right? That's been my passion for since I was a kid. The thing that they always tell you as a writer, they say show, don't tell. Right, and the criticisms about zero trust have all been, well, it's just a buzzword, it's too confusing. I don't know if you sat down and read like NIST 800-207. I feel like I'm a smart person in general. I'm a security practitioner. It's hard to understand what the heck is going on in 207, right? It's very technical, very confusing, even for industry experts. A lot of what people know about zero trust out there has been driven by marketing teams that are pushing their particular product, and maybe they fit a certain niche, and there's an important role that those folks play. They're necessarily pushing their own angle on zero trust. So to be able to again show, not tell, what zero trust is, and have an environment that people can relate to, I think makes zero trust more approachable, right? That's, I think, what we need when it comes to zero trust is everybody's got to play a role. Anybody in IT, even the vendor ecosystem, right? We all have to understand what we're working through and why. And man, I loved, Dylan, as the way that you mentioned, we made his character come in. He's not a security person. This organization, the fictional company that we created, is not a, they have, they're a startup, right? They have systems, they've got security in place, but I didn't want to create this perfect utopia where you can't learn anything. I didn't want to make them a company where they're totally broken. They're somewhere in the middle, right? And everybody's got to kind of see like, okay, this aspect of my company, right? I know we have this weakness, and I wanted to be able to like have this theme where people could go in, if you're an experienced person, you can get something out of it. If you're a novice, you can kind of help orient yourself toward where you want to go in the industry. But I think that makes it more relatable, right? So Dylan is an IT infrastructure guy who gets kind of pushed towards security because there's nobody else there that's available to do the job. And I think that again reinforces the message that anybody can do zero trust, right? You don't have to be a security nerd like James and me. You can deliver zero trust, and again that message resonates with the team, the interdisciplinary team he builds, and you get to know them, and I hope that you start to love them, because those are going to be your role models when you're going back into your company and trying to implement zero trust.
Yeah, I mean, it's the characters in this book kind of take it a different path, and as the company goes through the breach, Dylan gets that job offer that he turns down because he's like, I'm going to see this one through. These guys stuck with me, and I'm gonna see them through. You'd hope you'd find people as loyal as Dylan is, because most of the time, as you and I both know, with our peers who've been through events, that's not always the case. People tend to jump ship at the moment bad stuff starts to happen.
And again, I've got like a whole series of blog articles on my site about how people are the most important part of zero trust, right? If we lose sight of that, it's the humans that have to go do the zero trusty stuff. Man, I mean, I think there's a tendency for us in the industry to maybe be a little cynical, and maybe rightly so, because we see folks in our industry be a scapegoat, and that's not cool either. So finding that happy medium, I think is a challenge. But I wanted him to have a reason for staying at the company and putting in long hours. We incorporated the pandemic into the book. And I mean, the company makes treadmills with an app and an interface and all that. And in this fictional scenario, he's a customer of the company, right? He believes in the product.
I mean, that's how the book starts, by the way. Like, exactly. He wakes up, he can't go to sleep, and he hits the treadmill, right? It's definitely there. So I want to ask you another question here. So Zero Trust, the Project Zero Trust book, shares a theme with another one of the books that you wrote that I love, which is Well Aware.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you brought from Well Aware into this book?
There is a chapter. One of my favorite chapters in Project Zero Trust is the chapter about culture, and it's very different from the other chapters, right? There's a lot of like short vignettes where you get to see different people interacting inside the company, or even some of the treadmill like instructors, right? Everybody plays a role in security, and I think bringing that to life, right? That's the key theme in my career is, gosh, we've got to invest in our people. One of the reasons I work for a university is because I believe in the power of education to help us in the cybersecurity world, in the IT world, make a difference, right? So, gosh, thinking back to 7 years ago when I taught my first class here at SMU, the most impactful thing for me in my career was when a student came in for office hours and was like, I'm going to go and do a career in cybersecurity because of this class. Like, holy cow, James, like in terms of moments in my life, I mean, top 10 for sure. And just because I know that I'm making a difference, I'm doing something meaningful that's going to outlast me in my career. I think we've got to believe in security that we can make a difference, right? And I think too often we fall into the trap that it's we say that it's a matter of when, not if. But if we believe that, right, I mean, we're going to fall into that cynical mindset. I think we've got to be optimistic and hopeful as a prerequisite for success, and believing that success is possible. That I think is the key theme that carries through all of these books, and I think that's what's going to set folks up for success in their careers. Is that kind of mindset that's different from the stereotypical like CISO that pounds their fist on the desk and says no to everybody all the time, right? That doesn't work in a modern organization.
I don't know if that's stereotypical anymore, right? I mean,
I hope not. Yeah.
Right. I would hope not as well. I think it's very interesting to think of the role of the CISO and the evolution of it over time. Even in the 4 years I've been doing this podcast and speaking to so many of our peers, I've seen an evolution in mindset. If I go back and listen to some of the first episodes I did in 2018 to the episodes now, the conversations are very, very different. There's an evolution where we're on the scale of going somewhere really interesting. So, I wanted to ask you this. I wanted to hear a little bit about your journey with Zero Trust, right? Because I told you before we started recording, you'll have to give me a buzzword for the graveyard. And about 50-60% of our peers over the life of the show have kind of used Zero Trust as a buzzword. And I feel like this is an episode where we can potentially maybe get some of them to buy into Zero Trust. I wasn't a big proponent of Zero Trust either. I think reading your book made me understand it a bit better and look at it a bit more. I mean, in my last role, I did kind of build a Zero Trust infrastructure without really knowing I was building a Zero Trust infrastructure, just kind of using security best practices. So share with us the kind of your journey into Zero Trust. How'd you buy into it and so forth?
So, again, my journey, goes back to my startup days, right? Inheriting a server that the guy that preceded me had locked down to a degree that I've not really seen since in the last 20 years, right? That kind of mindset of Zero Trust, I think, has been in security for a long time. And really the two words, right? We tried to distill it down into something that's very easy for everyone to understand. Is Zero Trust? It's two words. The implications there are really incredible. So me and my career, I think being at a single organization for 20 years now, which is so long. I never expected to be at SMU this long, but it's afforded me the ability to influence all of the aspects that you'd want to incorporate into your Zero Trust journey. And I the journey in the book kind of mirrors my own progression, right? So when we opened the George Bush Presidential Library on campus, my team took over physical security. We inherited application security. We've started to do identity, and we're on our cloud journey now, right? So the very very similar process. And I'm very lucky to have been a part of this this journey. But if I had maybe taken a different route, if the average tenure of a CISO is 2 or 3 years these times, maybe that's one budget cycle for you to go through, maybe two to deliver that strategy. And maybe you're only seeing parts of that journey, whereas you're inheriting a lot of other stuff. You talked about how being at a startup, starting from scratch, maybe you make a lot of different choices, but I think seeing the progression, we've tried to incorporate, security best practices for a long time. We were an early adopter on microsegmentation, and what I think the message that I would send to those Zero Trust skeptics out there is, I think what Zero Trust is, and we talk about this in the book, Zero Trust isn't your architecture. And that's really where the conversation around Gartner or whatever has pushed. Zero Trust is your strategy, and so I'm going to make an analogy for a second. They say what's the saying in the military? Good generals study tactics. Great generals study logistics.
Right.
And when you think about a battlefield, right, you want to understand the terrain, and that is a CISO understanding the environment that they're protecting, what the company's doing, where their apps are at, what the business processes are, all of those things. And then what does the general need to know? Well, the general needs to know what his troops' capabilities are. What tools do you have to bring to bear in that environment, right? Is it artillery? Is it air power? Is it infantry? What all of those different things, you have to understand what capabilities you have, what tools you have available, and maybe there are new tools right out there in the universe that you would want to bring in. Okay, all of those things are great, and now, right? So that's what we spend a lot of time as an industry, talking about our understanding. So at that point, when you know that as a CISO, then you've got to implement your strategy for how to take the tools you have to deliver the mission and to protect or control the battlefield, if you will, right? Okay, so Zero Trust is that strategy, right? That takes you from having the tools to implementing them effectively, as effectively as possible. And Zero Trust really is about prevention. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So really, we know, if you secure things early on, it's going to be much less expensive than after the fact, right? Focusing on prevention and having a coherent strategy to bring all of your different parts of your organization together towards that same mission of zero trust, right? So, again, security teams aren't the only groups in your organization that do security, right? You've got infrastructure, you've got your help desk or desktop support, you've got cloud or your developers. All of these people have to play a role in zero trust, right? They've all got parts to play, and aligning all of those towards the same strategy is the thing that I think it's the thing that we've kind of been missing. And I don't know that there are other strategies out there collectively, and maybe everybody can have their own, but this is a great way of bringing everyone to the table. And in military circles, they talk about commander's intent, understanding what the general intends for that given mission, so that it's clear for everyone. And that really was the idea, was again, simplifying this into 2 words. Everybody can kind of rally around that mission, whatever part of the battlefield, so to speak, that we're talking about.
Yeah, I love it. Chapter 5 of the book is probably my favorite. It's the identity cornerstone. And I feel like, the fact that you called it identity cornerstone to me marks, something I've been kind of talking about for the last year or so, is that the goalposts have shifted from endpoints to identity. Would you mind sharing, I don't want to give away the book, right? So would you mind sharing kind of a little bit about how you see identity's role in zero trust?
Yeah. So, I think, the way you described it, goalposts has shifted is certainly true. And again, we talk about deperimeterization, right? And all of the things that we talk about in security, generally speaking, fall in the category of tactics, right? And your strategy
Right.
will align all of the different tactics together. The interesting part about identity when it comes to zero trust is that it's not just a tactic, right? It both informs identity as well as consumes it. And I think, it's really a key feature, particularly around, organizations when, you have folks working from home, or you've got apps or in the cloud, right? All of those different places. How do you make sure that you're delivering zero trust? Well, identity is what we have to go do that in all of those disparate locations. That's the one thing that unifies all the different parts of our infrastructures.
Identity is kind of you no longer trust the endpoint, you trust the identity behind the endpoint rather than the endpoint itself. And it really does change the game. I think it's, we're moving from, it used to be get a VPN, get a good antivirus or EDR product, and you're pretty good. Today, I'd be like, get a good password manager, make sure you've got good MFA. Then you can have EDR and VPN, but I'd probably focus on the first 2 over the latter 2 for initial cyber hygiene for an well-aware individial.
I see what you did there.
Did you like it?
Yeah. I think, gosh, I mean, I would say identity is kind of the glue that connects everything together. But also, we can do things with identity, right? We can force reauthentications. We can monitor for suspicious behavior. All of those things, again, reinforce what we're doing with zero trust, which is to prevent or contain breaches inside our environments.
So it becomes very interesting to me, because identity as a whole, right? If we geek out for just a moment here, is the following. So in my last role in financial services, one of the things we engineered for our customers, for our users, is when you're using your card in a way that triggers a fraud alert, where in most cases, most banks would either decline the transaction or otherwise maybe just honor it and take the risk, depending on what it is, we would do a reauth. So we'd actually have a notification pop up in the app for the user that says, are you trying to do this? All right. And take a picture of yourself. Go ahead, take a selfie. Now, this gave us so much it created a whole different level. It's essentially the definition of zero trust. You're at a Gucci store. If you take a picture and I see you behind a white wall at your home, right? I realize that's not you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you could look at the metadata in the picture. Yep. You could look at so many different things to leverage that. And, I'll throw out another example, right? So one thing that I think should force MFA reauthentications across the board, I talk about this in the book, but password resets.
Yep.
Right. That's not a super common thing right now. But if you're trying to change your password, right, there's a better than average chance that it's not you. I mean, it could be me because I never remember my passwords. I forget them all the time. And, but that's okay. Right. And I think that again, thinking about the life cycle, right. What's happening, out in your environment, finding those opportunities to inject some things like reauthentication. Again, that makes our defenses a lot more granular than. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I would do reauthentication with human behavior analytics on the bottom line of it. Meaning,
yeah, totally.
Is it the way you're making the request before I even pop the MFA? Is what's the chances that this could be a bot or a script running rather than a human actually doing it? I mean, technology is so far advanced, and we a lot of times invest so much in kind of other things rather than really protecting. You talk about protecting the crown jewels, right? And the journey of kind of defending the crown jewels, create a few practice scenarios, do it very low end, make sure everyone understands it before you get into the crown jewels. Well, in this case, understand how users are going to be interacting with all of your different applications in the business, and then make that your first crown jewel that you defend is that identity, since that's the cornerstone of everything you're doing. Have human behavior analytics there. Invest time and money in making sure that your users can, one, easily interact with your applications, but number two, that they can easily re-access it without really making it too complex, but at the same time, giving your team, your security operations team, enough of a pathway to really ensure that the person is who they say they are, especially in a remote distributed work environment that so many organizations are in today.
Well, and I mean, just think about, the identity is what the hackers are after, right? There's a reason for that, right? We look at the Okta breach or Twilio or some of those others, right? That, we have to get a handle on those kinds of identity theft or impersonation attempts, whatever they are. And identity is how we do that.
Yeah, Log4j. I mean, look what happened in Rackspace last month. They didn't patch their Exchange server. They had mitigation. They got through mitigation. And Karen, who's the CISO over at Rackspace, is a very qualified CISO. She's not someone who's irresponsible by any measure of the imagination. She is sharp. I've heard her speak multiple times. She's sharp. She knows her things, but it doesn't make a difference if all it takes is for them to just understand one way to bypass something, and mitigation is never the final answer. It's only a temporary solution to a longer term. And, she kind of came out and really did explain why they didn't patch it, because it involved taking a critical system offline. And that kind of brought me to the whole creating a formula of how do you measure risk of patching? I don't think we live in a world today where no one expects where 99.9% availability is a thing anymore. Even cloud providers, for the first time since cloud has really launched, 2021 and 2022 were the first years where cloud providers were officially under the 99.9% availability. In fact, I think, AWS was at like 99.1, Azure was at 98.7, Oracle was at like 98.5. Google was at like 97%. There's no such thing as 99.9% availability anymore.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh, our jobs are so hard. I feel for them, right? We get lost in the budget battles or the political arguments we have to have or whatever. We've got to be professionals to manage that. But at the same time, I mean, we've got to get out of the risk, quantification. I mean, that's such a rabbit hole. We have to be able to do patching, right? That's that's such a hard conversation. If that's the, that's the battle you're fighting. It can feel really draining to just only be able to deliver the basics. And I'm sure they were doing other things really well. It's always.
I mean, and they were, because that ransomware only hit 1% of their infrastructure rather than 100, right?
Again, the point of zero trust is to prevent or contain. If you can't prevent, at least if you've isolated it to a small portion, that doesn't take down your organization. Again, that I think is still a win.
It is, and it absolutely is for Rackspace. And I hope their board and their leadership see that, and Karen doesn't become a victim of getting promoted to cybersecurity advisor there. Well, we're at time here. George, I want to put you on the hot seat here. For everyone, Project Zero Trust, go get this book. I promise you, a James Azar guarantee, you will not put this book down. You will read it, and it's not a very long book, by the way. The book itself is about 160 pages with another 30 pages or so of really, really valuable use cases and methodology and implementation ideas around zero trust. It really is a world of knowledge in 191 pages worth of text here. So do that. Links in the show notes. You're on the hot seat, George. Are you ready? Here we go, buddy. There's a buzzword that you can bury in my graveyard that's not zero trust. What is it?
I'm sure someone else has probably mentioned this, but some of the work I'm doing is trying to align with our overall organization's diversity and equity and inclusion elements, right? So I think we've got to stop saying blacklist and whitelist. I mean, full stop, and end of conversation. We can say safe list, we can say allow list. Those as buzzwords. I think it's pretty easy for us to get rid of them. Again, we want to make security approachable so that we can get more people into the industry, so that when we work with other folks in IT, they can collaborate well with us. And I think that just jives with that whole mission that we're all pushing toward together.
By the way, I think every single provider in the world has made it now a block list and an allow list. I haven't seen a wider blacklist in a very long time on software. Agreed. That shouldn't be one thing. That shouldn't be a thing at all. What's the last song you listened to before coming on the show?
I knew you were going to ask that. Let me pull it up. It looks like Hell's Bells by AC/DC.
All right. Or as they call him in Australia, Akka Daka. That's why it's Around Down Under.
I've started learning to play the guitar, and maybe other people realize this, but AC/DC is one of the easiest bands to play their songs, and so they're so much fun to play. Love that band. Gosh, one of the pioneers.
They are. It was so funny. I was listening to AC/DC when I was in Australia. I was in Melbourne for 3 months and had AC/DC blasted, and the person who was with me in the car, who's Australian, the gentleman goes, James, I didn't know you liked Akka Daka. And I was like, who? And he goes, Akka Daka. And I was like, what's Akka Daka, man? That's AC/DC. And he goes, in Australia, we call him Akka Daka. And I was like, you guys have been on this island alone for way too long.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes. Wow. Okay. I did not know that. And that's going to go into the trivia bank.
So let me ask you one final question for the show today. Being a published author, what book are you reading right now? Or if you are, or if you're not, what was the last book you read?
So I always have, I'm reading multiple books at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So generally speaking, like I'll try and read my nonfiction books in the morning on the drive into work, and the fiction books on the way home. For nonfiction, I'm reading about the book is called Social Science Goes to War, but it's about Afghanistan and this experiment that we tried called the Human Terrain System, where they brought in social scientists to partner with military units in Afghanistan in order to help understand the culture there, which is very different from what we know here in the U.S.
Yep.
And so, again, helping them make better decisions. I'm hopeful that that there's some nuggets I can take away back to my own practice relative to security awareness. And the fiction book I'm reading is really cool. It's the second book in a series. It just came out this week. The book is called Hellbent by Leah Bardugo. I'm sorry to her. I'm totally mispronouncing her name, I'm sure. But the idea is picture, if you will. I don't know if you're a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's not.
I stopped being about 3 years ago. I got turned off by vampires and bats.
So there is a vampire in it, kind of. But imagine, it's essentially the college version of Buffy, where Buffy goes to Yale, and there's a Hellmouth in the Yale library. I'm giving some things away because that's in the second book, but this girl has this superpower. Goes to Yale, solving mysteries, fighting demons, and has magic and whatever. Like Skull and Bones, all the secret societies are actually use magic. It's kind of more. It's more realistic than maybe not as maybe Buffy was, which was more kind of fluffy comedy. But oh my gosh, so engrossing. I'm almost finished with the book this week, and it's been fun. Hellbent by Leo Bardugo.
Awesome. All right, folks, that's it for our show today. Project Zero Trust by George Finney. Go grab it. It's on Amazon or I think it's only in Amazon, right, George? Or on your website, DelawareSecurity.com?
Yeah, so no, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, it's available in all places fine books are sold. Also, there is an audio book which people really love. We got one of the actors from The Walking Dead to be the narrator of Project Zero Trust. He does a phenomenal job. Definitely check out the audiobook if you're into audiobooks.
Brilliant. Perfect. George, thanks for being on the show. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Another episode next week of CISO Talk. Make sure you tune in, subscribe, follow us on your favorite podcast listening platform or our YouTube channel. Till then, have a great rest of your day. George, thanks for being on the show. Go grab his book. Links in the show notes. Have a great rest of your day and stay cyber safe, folks.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.